Right, I'm back with a part 2. I do hope the volume is slightly better on this now. Be keeping an eye on that. Right, back to where we left off. Hopefully you should be able to hear the background music a little better now. The background music is fantastic, so... Right, as we were. The harbour was already drawing near. Just want to make sure you hear this because it's a great soundtrack. So, a tiny little summary. The boat landed. Ta-da! There you go. And we met the family. There you go. The boat gave a big shudder. Seems we've docked at the harbour. The boat driver came out and jumped to the pier with the mooring rope. A large man in a tuxedo was waiting there for us with a warm smile. I didn't recognize his face, but judging by his clothes, I guessed he was a servant of the Ushiromiya head household. That seems loud.
お嬢様、お帰りなさいませ。だいぶ遅かったので心配しておりました。
心配ありがとう。ウドの大木が怖がっちゃってよ。それで徐行運転だったってわけ。マジでうぜえぜ。
うるせえ。いつか逆の立場になったら覚えてろ。
At this rate, word will spread to the whole family, and I'll be the big conversation piece during dinner. Even without this, everyone would be talking about me because of that 6-year gap, but now I've given them an even bigger, juicier topic. Damn it, why does the Ushiromiya head family have to live on this isolated island? In the meantime, the boat had finished its mooring. A small plank was lowered so that we could get down. One by one, our parents came up from inside the boat.
皆様、長旅お疲れ様でした。奥様、お手をどうぞ。
ありがとう。お久しぶりね。ゴーダさんもお元気？
ありがとうございます。おかげさまで毎日元気にお勤めをさせていただいております。
バトラ君はゴーダさんとは初対面じゃない？確か6年前はお勤めじゃなかったですよね。
はい。ですので、バトラ様とは初めてご挨拶させていただきます。はじめまして、バトラ様。
俺もタッパには多少の自信があったんだが、でっけえ人だな。
Such a nice thing to say.
紛れもなく初対面だぜ。こんな大男あったら絶対忘れないさ。どうも、はじめまして。バトラス。
お待ち申し上げておりました。一昨年から後宮本家にお仕えさせていただいております使用人のゴーダと申します。
Yep, you hear that little ping sound? That means there's something new on the tips board. So if we go here, there look, we can see now it's been updated with a servant Goda. A servant hired as a cook. He hasn't served his family long, but through his earlier jobs and previous experience, he's cultivated a talent for entertaining guests. Because of this, he's highly regarded as a servant. Yep, that's Goda.
どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。何かご用命がございましたらいつでもお申し付けください。
ゴーダさん、お久しぶりです。
ジョージ様、ご無沙汰をいたしております。お手をどうぞ。
あんた相変わらず大した接客のプロや。もし食に困ったらいつでもわしに声をかけるんやで。 いつでも雇ったろ。
これは身に余る光栄です。どうぞお手を、秀吉様。
Goda-san then lent a hand to everyone as they disembarked, greeting them as they passed. His speech and mannerisms had the refined polish of a professional. He was very graceful in contrast with his initially tough-looking appearance. His large size made him seem a bit scary at first, but he was much more polite than my first impression had led me to believe. He claimed to have served on the island for 2 years, but he had doubtless worked at similar jobs somewhere before. After everybody disembarked, the mooring rope was untied and the boat started to steer away from the harbour. It was probably returning to its home port on Nijima. The captain waved his hand in farewell. Maria conscientiously waved her hand back.
なんだかさっきから違和感があると思ったら、海猫の声を聞いてないぜ。
He said it. He said Umineko. Ha 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 ha. Roll credits.
海猫？鳥のか？
It was said twice. Roll the credits again. If I remember correctly, whenever we came to this island in the past, the seagulls always greeted us with their lively nya nya cries. This is not where I got nya from, by the way. Because of that, whenever I hear the cries of the seagulls anywhere else, I get the feeling that I'm coming to a family conference. Except for the small part of the island where those of the Ushiromiya head family live, Rokkanjima has been left uncultivated, which apparently makes it a paradise for wild birds. Supposedly, there was a cliff somewhere that housed a huge seagull colony, so this island was always so full of seagulls. Not having those seagulls here to greet us made us feel a bit lonely.
どうしたの？バトラ君。
ああ、ローザおばさん。いやー、別に。海猫の声が聞こえないんで、なんか寂しいなーって。
あら、そういえばそうね。いっつも賑やかなのに、今日はさっぱりいないわね。どうして海猫いない？
I mean, it's probably the typhoon, but never mind, Maria.
海猫たちも今日はよそで集まりがあるからかな。マリアも海猫見たかったの？見たかった。
なんだってこうもまるっきりいねえんだ。ジェシカがみんな焼き鳥にして食っちまったんかな。
Man, what does he think about his cousin, huh? Oh god, poor Maria.
物騒なこと言うんじゃねえ。マリアが勘違いするだろ。ジェシカお姉ちゃんが焼き鳥にしたしてないしてない。そんなの私がするわけねえだろ。
そうだそうだ、ジェシカが焼き鳥にしたんだ。皮につくねにレバーにネギマン、皮にくつねりレバーにネギマン。
As I made fun of Jessica, Maria tagged along looking like she was having fun. Oh, I never guessed you were such a good sport. Alright then, from today I'll make you my #1 follower. As I smiled at her, she beamed, looking overjoyed, possibly because she was happy about this little connection we'd made with each other.
違うよ、マリアちゃん。野鳥って天気や気圧の変化に敏感なんだそうだよ。今夜あたり天気が崩れそうだしね。末早めに引き上げてるのかもしれないね。
I love how this 23-year-old is somehow the voice of reason right now.
焼き鳥じゃない？
Yeah, probably not, Maria. So sorry.
ジェシカお姉ちゃんが焼き鳥にしたんじゃない？違う。私はそんなことしないって。ほら、バトラも嘘だったって認めろよ。
Double down. Do
バ
it.
トラ君、
Do it. Double down.
マリアちゃんは素直な子だから、そういう冗談でも真に受けちゃうんだよ。冗談も少し選んだ方がいいよ。
George Aniki gently scolded me. Even though I outstripped Aniki in height, Aniki was Aniki, of course. There was no choice but to obediently apologize.
おう。ありよあり。マリア、今のは冗談だ。海猫たちは今日は素でおとなしくしてるってさ。
バトラは嘘？ジョージお兄ちゃんは本当？
Had she actually been tricked despite all that fun she was having? Her pure eyes made me feel guilty. Maybe I went a little overboard with her after all.
ああ、そうだそうだ。ジョージ兄貴が言ったのが本当だ。天気が悪いんで今日は引き上げたんだろうよ。いなくなったわけじゃないんだぜ。ね、おばさん。
そうよ。明日以降天気が良くなったらきっと戻ってきてミャーミャーと声を聞かせてくれるわ。
ミャーミャー。
天気良くなって戻ってくるの待つ。明日まで待つ。天気良くなるまで待つ。
Maria was in a lighter mood and was looking forward to tomorrow when the seagulls would come back and fill the skies. Still, George Aniki was really amazing at taking care of kids. I think I remember Aniki taking good care of me as well when I was a brat 6 years ago. Aniki, that's probably your gift.
ジョージ君は小さい子の面倒を見るのがうまいわね。保育士さんでも務められるんじゃない？
なあ、ジョージ兄さんの転職っぽいぜ。私的には社長室でビジネスってよりそっちの方が兄さんのイメージだぜ。
まさか保育士さんは立派なお仕事だよ。単なる子供好き程度に務まる仕事じゃないね。
本当にジョージ君は謙虚ね。でもバトラ君も子供のあやし方が上手よ。さっきはほんの少しの間だけどマリアとっても楽しそうだった。これからも今みたいに遊んであげてね。冗談は選んでだけどね。
Aunt Rosa winked at me, giggling a little. She's a real mother, I thought to myself, who's happy to see Maria having fun.
おいローザ、それにガキどもも何やってんだ。行くぞ。
はいはい、今行きます。
The old bastard was waving for us to hurry up. Yeah, we needed to get moving. We might as well have this conversation after setting our luggage down in our rooms.
それでは皆様、お泊まりのゲストハウスの方へご案内させていただきます。どうぞこちらへ。
Goda-san called to everyone and led the way. Kohaku-Saurus-san brought up the rear. Of all the words in that sentence, why did I have trouble with that one? This island is so beautiful. A serpentine, twisting path led through the dim forest. It ran a bit uphill. I guess the path was made all twisty so the slope wouldn't seem so steep. But personally, I'd have been happy if they had the guts to make some stairs in a straight line. No doubt they made the path a twist on purpose to put airs on distance and importance. Before long, we saw garden-style stone steps. Ah, from here on, I do have some memories. Go up these and... At the top of the stone steps, we saw a beautiful guest house. Oh, you can't hear this song that well. You need to hear this, is all. Lovely song. Sorry, my bad. I'd wanted to keep it around the same. Oh yeah. Sorry, continuing. We couldn't enter its doors without having our hearts stolen away by the splendour of the beautiful rose garden spreading before it.
はあ、今年も相変わらず大したもんや。目の保養とはこのことやで。
After climbing the stone steps, the people greeted by this rose garden gave voice to their impressions one by one.
今年は少し花に元気がないんじゃない？やっぱり夏があまり暑くなかったせいかしら。
そのせいもあるかと思います。去年の先に比べると今年は少々見劣るのが残念です。
Man, this song is so fucking beautiful. Ah, this guy's a genius when it comes to sound. Even so, it was a delightful rose garden. I remembered that, even 6 years ago, huge numbers of roses had greeted us every year. This rose garden was the first thing that greeted the people who came to Rokkenjima. Even our parents who came every year couldn't help but give voice to their admiration. In fact, it seemed to have undergone a power-up from the garden in my memories of 6 years ago.
いつ見てもすごいわね。自宅にこれだけのバラ園があったらさぞや素敵でしょうに。
I mean, you all have money, why don't you just, like, go ahead and build a fucking rose garden at home? Just saying.
よせよ。誰がバラは虫とか病気とか大変なんだぜ。
Okay, as much as I like the song, it's actually overpowering the voices now. Shut up. Right, here we go.
キリエ姉さんは毎日バラの手入れをしてて虫がつかないようにしてるそうよ。
え?
Rudolph just doesn't get the joke.
そうなのかよ。そんな話は知らない。
そうなんです。この人の場合はバラの方から虫を求めていっちゃうから、どっちかというとたちの悪い食虫植物ってところね。
ああ、そういう話かよ。たく。ローザ、今日はそういう話は勘弁してくれよ。もうそういうのはすっかり足を洗ったんだぜ。
どうかしら。ルドルフ兄さんは遺伝子的レベルでだらしないですし。
大丈夫よローザさん。あんまりおいたするバラなら根元からちょんって切っちゃうから。
Sorry, I'm still just admiring the song.
物騒なお話ですね。
モテる男はいつもリスクと隣り合わせなんや。わしも来世じゃもうちょい美形に生まれたいもんやで。
だから秀吉兄さん、モテてなんかないって。キリエも物騒な話なんかやめろい。俺のバラがしおれちまったじゃねえか。
ほら、マリアちゃん、来てごらん。こっちのバラは特に立派だよ。
バラが立
かぐわしい匂いだぜ。俺のエレガントさにぴったりだな。
おいよせよ。マリアが真似してトゲで怪我するだろ。
She yelled at me as I leaned in to smell the rose's scent with an exaggerated gesture. I thought she was overreacting, but when I turned around, I saw Maria imitating my every gesture and George Aniki smiling broadly at us.
ほら、マリアちゃん、気をつけて。バラのトゲは痛いよ。
ジョージお兄ちゃん、このバラだけ変。
変？どうしたんだよ。
Maria pointed at a single rose. I immediately understood why she found it odd. In the midst of all these magnificent roses, one single rose was just starting to wilt. There wasn't any particular reason. Some roses flourish, and others wilt. That's all there was to it, but Maria seemed very concerned about the only unhealthy one in this group. It must have made her feel lonely.
このバラだけ元気がなくて、かわいそう？
他はみんな元気なのに、これだけかわいそう。
まあ咲いたり枯れたりはそれぞれだからな。一足先にしおれる代わりに、そのバラは他のどのバラよりも早く開花できたんだと思うぜ。
そうだよな。いっぱい咲いて、その役目を終えてお休みに入ったってだけのことだと思うぜ。そんなに気に病むことはねえさ。
It seemed that Maria's pure, sensitive nature was making her feel some emotional pain for the rose that wilted alone. Even though she understood the logic of it, it still felt lonely to her.
じゃあマリアちゃん、帰るまでの間、このバラをお世話してあげるといいよ。
George Aniki straightened up and felt around in his pocket. He then took out the wrapper from the candy he had been sucking on the plane. He twisted it into a thin string and then gently tied it to the rose as a sort of marker.
へえ、なんだか可愛くなったね。
これがこのバラの目印だよ。後でお水とかをあげに来てごらん。バラさんもきっと喜ぶと思うよ。
お水とかあげに来る。
せっかくだからこのバラさんに何か名前をつけてあげるといいよ。そうするとバラさんも喜ぶと思うし、マリアちゃんと心もきっと通い合うと思うよ。
名前。
Though she still wore her usual sullen face, Maria crossed her arms and began to consider this intently. At the very least, she appeared to have been completely pulled out of her slump. Nice going, Aniki.
ジョージ兄さんって昔から包容力があるよな。尊敬するぜ。
だな、人徳ってやつだろ。後で爪の赤をもらってきてやるから一緒に飲もうぜ。
この庭園はお前が子供の頃にもこんなに立派だったんか？
私が出てってからよ、こんなに立派になったのは。
Probably because the servants had more time to look after the garden rather than looking after all the fucking children. But never mind.
前の庭園の方が素朴で愛着があったんだけどね。兄さんがちょっと悪趣味にいじりすぎたのよ。前の方がずっと良かったんだから。
エヴァ、ポジティブシンキングやで。昔は置いといて、今のこの美しさをめでなあかん。その方が心が安らかになるで。
別にそんな意味じゃん。ただ私は昔の方が素敵だった庭園をあなたにも見てほしかったなってだけよ。
それでは皆様、そろそろお部屋の方にご案内いたします。
Goda-san called to everyone to ask if we were ready, but our hearts had been completely stolen away by the rose garden that none of us had seen for years, so we didn't pay much attention to him. Since we weren't a travel group, it wasn't like we had a strict schedule to follow. Besides, since our parents were visiting their old home full of nostalgia, it wasn't like they had to let themselves be urged on by anyone or anything. Understanding the situation, Goda-san continued to wait, smiling widely, until our parents got tired of the roses and told him to guide us to our rooms.
おや？おーい！カノン君やないか！久しぶりやな！元気か？
Uncle Hideyoshi suddenly shouted. In the direction he was waving was a slender boy. Meeting him right after a huge man like Goda probably emphasized his small stature. The boy was in the middle of transporting piled up gardening tools and the like in a wheelbarrow. When he realized he was being called on to stop, he set down the wheelbarrow, took his hat off and bowed his head. I figured he was probably younger than me, and I realized by the general atmosphere surrounding him that he was another servant. He greeted us in response to Uncle Hideyoshi's call, but he seemed like he might be pretty unsociable most of the time. It was a greeting that lacked feeling. When Goda-san noticed that our interest had shifted towards him, he went to the boy's side and introduced him to us.
バトラ様、ご紹介いたします。後宮本家にお仕えしております使用人の一人です。
Now that the song's changed, it's out of whack again. There.
カノンさん、お客様にご挨拶を。
はじめまして。使用人のカノンです。
There's that little ping again. Let's have a look. We have a new character in our little repertoire here. Servant Canon. A young servant, he performs his duty silently and diligently, but is not so highly regarded as a servant due to his unsocial nature. There are multiple other servants with the On character in their swadoms. He and Shannon just so happen to be the ones on duty that day. Yes, we'll meet Shannon soon. I have a feeling you'll like Shannon. Yeah, my first impression wasn't wrong. He seemed to be unsocial, or at least not good at talking. Compared to Goda-san, who was extraordinarily polished as a servant, you couldn't help but feel an inexperience typical of his age. When Goda-san urged him in a whisper to give more of an introduction, the boy named Canon only cast his eyes downwards.
カノンさん、もう少し何か挨拶することはできませんか？い
え、僕たちは家具ですから。
He didn't seem to be refusing to greet us out of spite. Rather, he seemed to have fallen silent because he didn't know what else to say to us in greeting.
カノン君は寡黙でさ、余計なおしゃべりはしない性分なんだよ。愛想は少し悪いけど、根はいい人なんだぜ。誤解しないで。ここに勤めて3年になるんだっけ？確かゴーダさんより1年長いんだよな、カノン君。
Even though he wasn't exactly giving a terrible first impression, Jessica hurriedly backed them up. I see, apparently his unsocial nature causes him trouble a lot.
そっか。よろしくな。俺はバトラ。18だけど、君はいくつだい？
He fell silent, as though wondering whether or not it was a question he'd have to answer. But here again, Jessica ploughed ahead.
確か私たちの2つ下だから16だったよな。はい、そうです。
It looked like he would have preferred not to tell us his age if given the choice. That was probably because he thought we'd look down on him for it. I remember that when I was around his age, I hated being asked how old I was by adults. I see, 16, huh? That's gotta be a delicate time. Which means I probably asked something I shouldn't have.
近いとして嬉しいぜ。気さくにバトラって呼んでくれよな。俺も君のことはカノンって呼ぶぜ。
ありがとうございます。お気持ちだけで結構です。バトラ様。
Jessica looked panicky for some reason. She seemed to think my impression of Canon was getting worse because of his refusal. Well, as a girl, Jessica probably couldn't understand a fretful male heart at his age. As his elder, even by just 2 years, I took it upon myself to be understanding of that.
カノンさん、もう少し愛想よくはできませんか？
It's still out of work. This is driving me up the wall. There.
笑顔も使用人の義務ですよ。
申し訳ありません。努力します。
ゴーダさん、カノン君もいろいろ頑張ってるんですよ。ねえ。
Yeah, I think I'll leave it there for music. It looked like he was often warned about being unsociable. And apparently, he hadn't improved one bit. Goda-san kept his business smile, but let out a small sigh of resignation escape.
それではまだ仕事がありますので、失礼します。
It looked like Canon himself was uncomfortable with remaining silent here any longer. After another perfunctory bow, he turned around and started pushing the wheelbarrow again. Just then, the wheelbarrow suddenly wobbled and fell, scattering the load. I guess the wheelbarrow's single wheel got caught on a pebble and lost its balance.
何をしてるんですか。早く片付けて。
Goda-san urged him to hurry in a quiet voice, as though hinting that it was shameful for a servant to appear clumsy in front of guests. Cannon wordlessly reloaded the barrow with the fallen objects, as if to say that he understood quite well without being told. He seemed to be fine with the light-looking gardening tools, shovels and such, but he looked like he was having trouble getting his arms around and lifting up some of the sacks of fertilizer.
大丈夫かよ。そそっかしいな。ほら。
お嬢様、お召し物が汚れます。ここはお任せください。
With a smooth motion, Goda took the shovel that Jessica had picked up. Behind him, Cannon was having trouble with the sacks of fertilizer.
お召し物が汚れる？
安心しろよ。俺が着てるのはそんなお上品なものじゃねえぜ。それによ。俺はレストランで落ちたフォークをウェイトレスに拾わせるってやつが大嫌いなんだ。
I lifted up the other bags that had fallen. Of course they weren't light, but for me it was a piece of cake. Cannon looked at me, surprised. It was the face of someone who never would have expected to receive help from a guest.
バトラ様、結構です。僕が全てやりますので。
気にすんな。こう見えても鍛え方が違うぜ。
Since Cannon-kun looked like he hadn't yet gone through his growth spurt, he was stuck with a sort of weak body. This kind of weight might have been too much for him.
結構重いね。カノン君が苦労するのも無理はないよ。カノン君、気にしないで。
これぞ俺の見せ場さ。これでさっきの船の分はチャラだよな。
この程度のことじゃさっきの大騒ぎが帳消しになるもんかよ。カノン君にも後で教えてやるよ。バトラったら面白いんだぜ。
落ちる落ちる。
As they did this, I piled all the stuff back into the wheelbarrow.
お見苦しいところをお見せして申し訳ございませんでした。
さあもう結構ですよ。行ってください。
Letting the guests, who were supposed to feel welcome, see such a disgraceful thing must have been hideously embarrassing for a servant. Pressed by Goda to hurry up and go, Cannon-kun left.
ゴーダさんもいじめすぎよ。意地悪言わないで、あなたも手伝えばよかったんじゃない？
これは至りませんで、誠に申し訳ございませんでした。
Without even a twitch in his smile, Goda-san apologized elegantly.
カノン君もええところはぎょうさんあるんやで。ただ若いんかの。いろいろもったいないわ。
気難しい年頃さ。そっとしといてやれよ。使用人は寡黙なくらいがちょうどいいさ。な、熊沢さん。
ルドルフ様は手厳しゅうございますこと。
This family don't mince their words.
使用人で寡黙なものはおりませんとも。
Everyone smiled wryly at that obvious lie. Even she herself didn't believe that, not in her wildest dreams. So she must have said it to lighten the mood. Yeah, that's the kind of character Kumasawa Ba-chan used to be. The once stiff atmosphere had cleared up at once thanks to her cheerful smile.
そろそろ荷物を置きたいわね。ゴーダさん、部屋割りはどうなってるのかしら。
昨年と同じになっております。さあ、ご案内いたします。どうぞこちらへ。
We headed towards a trim, elegantly simple guest house. This was going to be our temporary quarters for the night. Cannon watched over a hedge as all the guests entered the guest house. Then he let his eyes fall on those heavy sacks of fertilizer piled up in the wheelbarrow. In his mind, he kept going over his previous mistake. Battler, big and strong, had picked up the sacks in front of him, the sacks that Cannon couldn't lift himself, as if they were feathers. It would be extremely difficult for an outside observer to guess what emotions that favour had stirred up in Cannon. But as far as you could tell by watching him hang his head, there was something that he just couldn't let go of. Muttered words escaped his lips, but those words he murmured were so soft that they didn't reach even his own ears. Cannon hung his head, slightly biting his lower lip.
バラの庭園は記憶にあったんだけどよ。このゲストハウスっつうのは記憶にねえな。これ建てたのは最近か？
Torian, Visitor's Retreat, was written on a gatepost-like thing, but since everyone called it the guest house, I followed their lead. The brand new Western-style guest house, which stood overlooking the roses, had magnificent design carefully drawn in harmony with the garden.
正解だよ。建ったのはつい一昨年さ。それ以降は僕たちはこっちに泊めさせてもらってるんだよ。
年季の入ったボロ屋敷よりこっちの方が好評みてえだしな。私も自分の部屋をこっちに持ちたいぜ。
マリアも持ちたい。持ちたい。
I guess you could say my own house was upper class, but to me it felt completely ordinary compared to the head family. The display of wealth was shocking, as was the fact that they'd built this kind of awesome guest house for guests who come over only once a year.
エヴァ様、秀吉様、こちらのお部屋をお使いくださいませ。ルドルフ様、キリエ様はこちらのお部屋をお使いくださいませ。
So basically they're splitting everybody up in their little families, so Eva and Hideyoshi are going to have a room, Rudolph and Kyrie is going to have a room, Rosa and Mario is going to have a room, and then the rest of the grandkids, I believe, are going to have like a room too.
やっぱりここは綺麗で上品でいいわね。洋風って本当に素敵だわ。
ほんの2、3日なら洋風もええやろが、ずっといて落ち着くのは断固和風やで。日本人は畳の上が一番くつろげるんや。
新しい家を和風にするか洋風にするかで喧嘩してね。お父さんが和風で着工させたのを母さんまだ根に持ってよく言い合いをするんだよ。
ジョージ兄さんのところは両親仲が良くて羨ましいぜ。うちなんか冷め切ったもんさ。そのくせ私の成績の話だけは連帯しやがる。
All the rooms seemed to be for 2 people. I was grateful since I wasn't going to be forced to share the same room with the old bastard under the pretext that we were family. And anyway, I figure those 2 wouldn't be able to enjoy themselves with someone like me around. Hehe.
何気持ち悪い顔で笑ってんのよ。どうせ下世話なこと考えてるんでしょ。
下世話なんてとんでもない。どうぞごゆっくりお過ごしくださいませ。あ、はいててててて。いえたよクソ親父。
Once again, Dad pulled my ears from behind.
バカなこと言ってんじゃねえ。俺は胃がキリキリ痛み始めてて、とてもそんな元気は湧かねえぜ。今回はお前が主賓だろうが、せいぜい親父や兄貴たちに可愛がられるよ。親父の前では言葉遣いにだけ気をつけろ。あの人、本当にシャレが通じねえからな。ジェシカちゃん、我らが当主様のご機嫌は最近どうなんだ？
去年から相変わらずかな。余命3ヶ月余命3ヶ月って割には相変わらずピンピンカリカリイライラしてるって話です。
今年も相変わらず不機嫌ってわけね。お守りができるのはやっぱり源氏さんだけなの？
親方様も源氏さんにだけは心を許しておいでのようです。私たち下々では近頃はお目通りすらなかなか叶わず。
また書斎に閉じこもって怪しげな黒魔術三昧じゃねえのかな。何をやろうとてめえの趣味だから構わねえけど、匂いが立ち込める系は勘弁してほしいもんだぜ。ついでにそのまま書斎から永久に出てくんなってんだ。
年長の人にそんな言い方をするもんじゃないよ。後ろ宮家を復興させてくれた大恩人なんだから、もっと感謝しないと。
まあ、ごめん。
After being rebuked by George Aniki, Jessica had no choice but to take back her thoughtless remark. The Ushiromiya family was wealthy beyond belief, but of course that meant all its members were a bit strange, and completely out of touch with the world at large. And at the top of the chain, the head family, our grandfather, seemed especially strange and terrifying, even for our family. Dad said he was getting a stomachache earlier, and I imagine that reflected the honest feelings of all the adults here today. No doubt they were jealous of us grandchildren, who could just play around and laugh without a care. From the stories Dad told me, the family head was a violent man who ruled with his fists, beating his children, even his daughters, mercilessly with a wooden sword. If he was so strict and uptight about that, why couldn't he have been a little more conservative with his kids' names? Because of that, even us grandkids had to suffer. Anyway, I can't say I have any trouble believing those terrifying stories about him. I don't remember meeting him very often, but I think I recall him looking extremely grumpy all the time, always making people cower with that sharp gaze of his. I remember that room's atmosphere got so tense when he was around, you couldn't even breathe. What my dad said about me being the guest of honor now carries a little more oomph for me.
6年前は俺も小学生だったが、さすがに今は高校生だ。失礼のある態度なんか取ったら大変なことになるかもしれねえな。怖い怖い。
確かにこわもてだけど、そんなに硬くなるほど怖い人じゃないよ。決して理不尽なことは言ってないもん。口下手なだけでちゃんと筋は通す人だよ。
ジョージ兄さんは昔から成績優秀で一族の鏡じゃねえかよ。私たちとじゃじい様の待遇が全然違うぜ。私なんか木刀で引っ叩かれたことあるしよ。尻だぜ尻。それも乙女の生尻をよ。
ジェシカちゃんは本家の跡取り娘だもん。おじい様も特に目をかけてくれてるんだよ。その厳しさは期待の気持ちの裏返しだと思わなくちゃ。
冗談じゃねえぜ。その跡取りってやつはジョージ兄さんに譲るよ。私が担ぐにはちょいとしんどいぜ。
I think I already said it before, but Jessica's the girl heir to the head family. We're only cousins in branch family, so she probably feels a totally different sort of pressure than we do.
ジェシカお姉ちゃんが重い？マリアが持ったら軽くなる？
サンキューな。
Mario is so innocent, man.
大丈夫。マリアちゃんには押し付けねえよ。この十字架は私が墓まで背負ってくよ。安心しなって。
She was grateful for Maria's innocent concern, but Jessica's face still seemed to contain some of the uneasiness she felt towards the future. Maybe we were in the same boat. Any high schooler with exams approaching would have trouble hiding their anxiety for the future.
マリアいらっしゃい。お母さんとマリアはこの部屋よ。
バトラ君は僕と一緒にこっちの部屋だってさ。
おお、なになに、こりゃ驚いた。親たちの部屋より広めじゃないのよ。わお。
どうせいとこ同士が集まるだろうと思ってよ。大きめの部屋にするように言っておいたんだ。
おお、マリアもこっちがいい。ママと一緒よりこっちがいい。
そうか、マリアもこっちがいいか。よし、ここは俺とジョージ兄貴の部屋だが、特別に出入りを許可してやろう。お母さんには内緒だぞ。
内緒。
Aunt Rosa was right behind us, but Maria still answered, striking the air with her fist clenched tight. After settling down their luggage in their rooms, our parents had gathered again in the corridor.
おいガキども、お前らはどうする？ここでいとこ同士おしゃべりでもしてるか？
It seemed that they were heading to the mansion to announce their arrival. Normally, they would make us follow them and greet everyone together, but if that had been the case, Dad would have just told us to come and that would have been the end of it. He's saying it's okay if we don't come, so what will we do?
どうせもうすぐお昼や。子供はそこでくつろいでたらええ。それに表で遊べるのは下手をすると今のうちだけかもしれんしの。
He means the typhoon, just before you get any wild ideas.
マリアはここでお留守番してなさい。いたずらをしないでおとなしく待ってるのよ。
Since Maria was being told to house sit here, we certainly couldn't leave her on her own. George Aniki noticed this immediately and gave a clear reply for all us cousins.
じゃあ僕たちはお言葉に甘えて留守番1年ぶりに積もる話もあるしね。
それがいいわ。バトラ君なんか6年分積もってるんだしね。
へいへい。お子ちゃまな俺はおとなしくお留守番してるぜ。
熊沢さん、私もこっちに残るからよ。あとは大人に任せて若者は退散してるぜ。
それがおよろしいでしょう。奥様にはそのようにお伝えいたします。
それでは皆様、お屋敷の方へご案内させていただきます。どうぞこちらへ。
他の子はともかく、ジョージは成人してるんだから連れて行った方がいいんじゃない？
そんなんでジョージだけ仲間外れはかわいそうやで。いとこ同士の交流も大事や。ほな、行ってくるで。
The adults left one after the other. They left in the same formations as our trip from the harbour, with Goda-san leading and Kumasawa-san taking up the rear. As we gathered in the room assigned to us cousins, George Aniki asked us to excuse him for a second. He rushed over to Kumasawa-san, who was following behind the disappearing adults, and seemed to ask us something. He soon finished his business and came back.
どうしたんだよ、兄貴。
ああ、なんでもないよ。ちょっと聞きたいことがあっただけさ。
マリアにも聞いて、マリアにも聞いて。
何かな。ジョージ兄さんが私に聞かなくて熊沢さんには聞くことって何かな。なあ、全然見当がつかねえぜ。
いや、誤解だよ。ジェシカちゃんが何を誤解してるのか知らないけど。
Aniki was getting pretty tongue-tied. It was almost as though he felt guilty about something, and Jessica knew exactly what he was worried about. At any rate, it's no fun if Jessica gets to know all about it and not me.
なあ、マリア。俺たちだけのけ者なんてねえよな。何の話か聞きてえよな。
バトラとマリアも聞きたい。バトラとマリアも聞きたい。
Ooh. I fooled around while oohing together with Maria.
いや、だから大したことじゃ。
さつけ。兄貴にしちゃ嘘が下手だぜ。拍手しやがれ。マリア、お前は右脇をくすぐれ。俺は左脇だ。
マリアは右脇で、バトラは左脇だ。
ちょっと二人ともやめて。やめ。
Maria and I played around, chasing George Aniki as he tried to escape rolling on the bed. I realise high schoolers aren't supposed to bounce around like kittens, but I still miss this kind of fun. A warm, cozy kind of fun.
ジョージ兄さんが熊沢さんに聞いたのはね。まあほらあれだぜ。兄さんも本家は1年ぶりだからよ。 その間に辞めた使用人とか入った使用人とか、そういうのがいたら挨拶したいって、そういうことらしいぜ。
おお、挨拶する。マリアも挨拶する。
なんだよそれ。全然やましくねえじゃねえかよ兄貴。違うな。マリア、騙されるな。兄貴は何か隠してるぞ。尋問再開だ。うおりゃ。
やめてよ本当に。マリアちゃんももうやめて。
多分掃除とか昼飯の準備とかで忙しいんだよ。大丈夫。後でちゃんと挨拶に来るぜ。ゴーダの出しゃばりの出迎えよりシャノンの出迎えの方が良かったって言うんだろ。
シャノン？思い出したぜ。そんな子もいたな。今も使用人やってんのか？元気かよ。
I think I'm gonna leave it just after this little cutscene. We've got it to a really nice place. So I'm gonna leave it here. Everyone's now settled in the guest house, or those who are staying in the guest house right now are settled in the guest house. We'll cut it just before the adults start having their meeting, because that's a long-winded affair, and I have to leave the house in around 30 minutes, and I still need my dinner and to get dressed. So we will save it right here for now. So just to kind of recap who everyone is, we have Ushiromiya Jessica, who is the heir to the Ushiromiya family. We have Ushiromiya Eva, who is the second child of the grandfather Kinzo. We have her husband, Ushiromiya Hideyoshi, and the son George. We have Rudolph, which is Kinzo's third child. His wife, Kyrie, and Rudolph's son Battler. Remembering that Kyrie and Battler are not related by blood, just by marriage. We have Rosa, who is Kinzo's fourth and final child, and her daughter Maria. And the servants we've met so far is Kanan, who is unsociable. Servant Goda, who comes across as a little bit of a bully for now, but we'll see how that plays out. And we have Kumasawa, who is a little bit of a gossip, you know, a nice, kindly old lady who's a little chatty. She doesn't quite have long left. She's got several things wrong with her at the moment. So, of course, we'll see how all that plays out. I hope you've enjoyed, and we will be back later. We'll save that here. I don't mind saving over that. So yeah, I'll record a bit more later.